be here. I'm here to tell you today that nature has beat cancer 12 times. Now, I'm at the Biodesign Institute. I know, gobstopping, right? I'm at the Biodesign Institute, and the whole idea behind the Biodesign Institute is to look into the designs that have evolved in nature and use those designs to solve real-world problems. And this is an example of that. Now, these guys have solved the cancer problem. An elephant is 100 times larger than a human, has 100 times more cells than a human, and yet gets less cancer than a human. Now, I want to take you through this problem in cancer biology called Peto's paradox that Amar just mentioned by telling you about these fictional creatures called Fwumpao. Right? These little guys, Fwumpao, they don't get much cancer. This one right here has got one cell that's about to become cancerous. So 1 out of 5, approximately. And it's important to understand that cancer starts in a single cell. Now, the Fwumpao have a sister species called the Megafwumpao. The Megafwumpao have 10 times more cells than the little guys. But otherwise, their biology is identical. So the Megafwumpao have a problem because they have 10 times more cells. They have the same probability per cell of getting cancer. And so pretty much every individual Megafwumpao is going to get cancer. In fact, it's more likely to get multiple cancers. It's a big problem for the Megafwumpao. They've grown big, and in nature, we've independently seen the evolution of large organisms 12 times. So there's been 12 different cases where evolution has solved the cancer problem. Because to grow so large, you have to find some way of suppressing cancer long enough to reproduce. Now, there's very good reason to grow large. It gets you more sex. There's another good reason. You don't get eaten as often. Right? So this is the reason why organisms tend to grow large, evolve to be large over time, but that brings this problem of cancer vulnerability with all those extra cells. And so they also have to evolve better ways of suppressing cancer. So the evolution of large body size and cancer suppression have gone hand in glove. Now, why should we care about cancer suppression in large organisms like elephants? And the short answer is because it's so hard to cure cancer. And to understand that, I need to take you down into the world of a tumor. It turns out that a tumor is a microcosm of evolution. Inside a tumor, we have billions to trillions of cells that are mutating like crazy. And some of those mutations, if they give the cell an advantage over the other cells, if it can divide faster or survive better, that mutant cell will start spreading in the tumor. And so you get evolution down at that cellular level that's driving this whole process of getting cancer. And eventually, in some people, in some organisms, will lead to a malignancy that may kill them. Now, this evolutionary process that's happening down at the cell level is also the reason we've had such a hard time curing cancer. So when a patient goes to the doctor because they're feeling sick and it turns out they have cancer, they have these billions to trillions of cells in their tumor, hundreds of thousands of mutations. And just by bad luck, some of those mutations can make a cell resistant to our chemotherapy. So when we apply the chemotherapy to a cancer patient, we kill most of the cells. It's just like spraying a field with pesticide. You kill most of the pests in the field, but you leave behind the pests that are resistant to your poison. And then you get an outbreak of pests that can no longer be controlled by your poison. The same thing happens in the oncology clinic. We apply chemotherapy to a tumor. We kill most of the cells, but we leave behind some cells that, are, just by bad luck, have mutations that make them resistant to our chemotherapy. And then the tumor regrows from those resistant cells. The tumor comes back, and now it no longer responds to that drug. That's the basic explanation for why we've had such difficulty curing cancer. And that explanation applies to every single drug that's been developed for cancer biology, for cancer therapy. Every drug selects for resistance. So cancer is an adaptive enemy. We're fighting the power of evolution when we fight cancer. And that's what led to a phone call from these guys. So the Naval War College has a strategic studies group that convenes every year to try to address and solve the pressing problems of the US Navy. And one of those pressing problems is that our enemies adapt to whatever we do, right? True in general, in warfare and military, our enemies adapt. So they called me, for some strange reason, but that reason was because I think about how do we deal with an adaptive enemy, that is cancer, and what can we learn from that? And this led to one of the embarrassing moments of my life. So I'm there. There's a U-shaped table. The military brass is around the table. The admiral of the War College starts introducing them. There's captain, captain, commander, captain, captain, captain. And I'm sort of used to thinking about rank in the Army, where captain ranks somewhere below major and a little bit above lieutenant. And suddenly I realized, wait a minute. These are captains of ships. They have thousands of people under them that depend on them. And I'm standing in front of them. It took me a moment to recover from that. But when I did, I told them 3 things. You can do 3 things with an adaptive enemy. 1, you can change the incentives on that enemy to make them into a friend or at least a neutral party. 2, you can try to contain them. That was the whole premise of the Cold War strategy. Or 3rd, you can try to slow them down so they can't adapt so quickly to what you do. And that's a key to cancer. Because in cancer, in many cases, the first mutation that starts that cancerous process happens 50 to 60 years before you feel sick enough to go to the doctor. It's happening throughout our lives, 50 to 60 years. Well, the implication of that is if we slowed that process just by a factor of 2, if we could double the time it takes to get cancer, then it would take 100 to 120 years to get cancer, and we wouldn't start feeling sick until we were well into the 2nd century of our lives. That's where we're going. So the way we try to adjust this in my lab is with aspirin. So the epidemiologists have told us that aspirin often seems to help prevent cancer. Now, aspirin is an anti-inflammatory drug. It reduces inflammation, and we think that's important because often inflammation drives cancer. But we don't know exactly how. So we study Barrett's esophagus. It's one of the tumors we study. It's a pre-cancerous tumor. It hasn't yet become malignant or life-threatening. Doesn't always do so. And we have a cohort of patients in Seattle that we've been following. And in that cohort, there are some patients that change their use of aspirin, usually because for heart disease. Right? So we're just observing what happens. And we were able to use these observations of the patients over time and sample their tumors. What we found is the people that went on aspirin, the mutation rate inside their tumor dropped by an order of magnitude, 10 times slower mutation rate in the people that started taking cancer. That's one of the ways that we're trying to approach it, to try to slow down this process by reducing the mutation rate. How have elephants done it? Well, our collaborator in Utah, Josh Schiffman, in his lab, what they found was when you take elephant cells and apply a little bit of radiation or some chemical mutagen, those elephant cells, rather than getting their DNA damaged and causing a mutation, they just kill the cells like that. Elephant cells are extremely sensitive to the DNA damage, and they kill themselves. It's a cell suicide process called apoptosis. So this is another way of reducing the mutation rate. Just kill every cell that gets a mutation. Now, a human cell won't kill itself so easily. It requires more radiation or more DNA damage for a human cell to commit suicide. In a mouse cell, they don't care if they get DNA damage. They're going to get picked off by a predator within a few months. They better just reproduce as fast as they can. So the mechanism that nature has discovered for preventing cancer in elephants seems to be through apoptosis, the cell suicide mechanism. Now, how do elephant cells do this? Well, they do it through a gene called p53. p53 is the most important tumor suppressor gene we know of. In humans, we have 2 copies of it, one from your mother and one from your father. Elephants have 40 copies. That's only a discovery my student Aaliyah Collin made a number of years ago. Sorry. So elephants suppress cancer. This is the first time we've been able to answer Peto's paradox. Elephants suppress cancer by this cell suicide mechanism. But there have been 12 independent times that large body size has evolved in mammals. Rhinoceroses also must have a solution to preventing cancer. They're huge animals. So do hippopotamuses. Giraffes also suppress cancer. They're very large animals. They've evolved this large body size completely independently of those other animals. Water buffalo, Indian bison, Shire horses, polar bears, manatees have also grown large independently. They must have a solution to cancer suppression. So have elephant seals. So have walruses. And so have whales. Now, it might be the case that nature rediscovered the same mechanism every time, but that's not true, at least in whales. We're currently studying whales in my lab. We're sequencing the genome and analyzing it. And I can tell you already, whales do not have extra copies of p53. They've only got 2, one from their mother, one from their father. So there's some new solution that we haven't yet discovered to preventing cancer. And what's exciting for me about this is that the solutions for preventing cancer are out there. They're down the street in the local zoo. They're across the world and all the other zoos of the world, and they're in the wild. All right. Now, I know what you're thinking. What about dinosaurs? And you're absolutely right. Nature discovered a way of suppressing cancer in dinosaurs probably multiple times. They're a lot harder to study than elephants. Nevertheless, my lab is starting to work on the dinosaurs as well. So the idea from biodesign is to take these solutions from nature, take these ways that nature has discovered viable, fertile organisms that can suppress cancer, and translate that into humans. And the whole idea here then is to use those ideas from nature to help us humans have longer, healthier lives. Thank you.